Thanks very much for inviting me. I will mention up front that most of my talk is about willows in a concentrated form. So it's really focused on this particular application, planted at 14 to 15,000 stems per hectare, as opposed to poplar planted in a forestry setting at 1,000 to 1,500 stems per hectare. So just an introduction, PRT Growing Services is a nursery company, so just want to be up front. We grow cuttings. We grow quite a wide variety of forest seedlings for the forest industry. We have nurseries in Ontario, Saskatchewan, Alberta, up at Beaver Lodge, as Richard mentioned. Most of our nurseries are in British Columbia. We also have a nursery in Oregon. 4 or 5 years ago, we got exposed to willow by accident in a way through Ken Van Rees at the University of Saskatchewan, who hosted one of his trial sites at our nursery in Prince Albert, Saskatchewan. And of course, traipsing around the nurseries, I happened to bump into it, and that was very interesting to us. So, why are sewage lagoons exciting to a willow grower? I'm going to talk about what we've learned to be the keys to success. One of which is moisture, availability to the plants. As Dr. Galilin mentioned last night, a range of 20 to 60 inches of rainfall is ideal for willow, and most of the areas where we operate don't have 20 inches of rain here. So this becomes very interesting to us. So our objective was to, in this context, is waste to resources. Our objective when we initially got into willow was for heat for our greenhouses. When natural gas jumped back in the early 2000s up to about $10 a million BTUs. Sorry, I've spent the last several weeks in the U.S., so I'm going to talk American in terms of units. I'm going to be in acres and whatnot. I can send you any information you'd like in the other version, but I have to pick one to keep my head in the correct space. So anyway, it was all about wood chip, and so we launched a project in Prince George, which is a 75-acre willow plantation. It feeds a 3-megawatt biomass boiler and heats 2 acres of greenhouses, which grow forest seedlings. But this is an example actually from Vermont of a combined heat and power plant at Middlebury College and chip delivery there. So we had to figure this out, so first thing I had to do was go and get inspired. So the hotbed of activity in North America is in upstate New York, around Syracuse, headed up by Tim Vogt and Larry Smart. Larry Smart has now moved over to Cornell University. Larry's the breeder. But this impressed the heck out of me. That's 3 years growth. Now, 30, 35 inches of rainfall, not 18. And in our language, it'd be about a zone 5 climate, so 2,000 to 2,500 corn growing 3 days, and good moisture. Continued our travels. This is right here in Edmonton at the Ellerslie site, albeit on Class 1 ag land. And I'll come back to that point, but this is very good land, very good nutrition, good organic matter content. But that's a 3-year-old, established root system, 1 year's growth. This is starting to get fairly impressive. Now to our site. We're on pure sand. This is a former bare root seedling nursery. So the ideal way to grow bare root forest seedlings is in sandy soil because it's easy to get them out of the ground, shake the dirt off. We shut down bare root seedling production in 1994 at this site. Basically, there's no demand for that product anymore. We grow all our seedlings pretty much in containers with peat moss around the roots, get higher field survival, higher survival and better field performance. We've tried many crops on this land. This is truly underutilized marginal ag land. It's real creamy to do the work, like to do the planting, to do the cultivation is really easy, but moisture retention is very poor. So disked on the left side and cultipacked on the right side. We like to finish the land with cultipacker. We're planting cuttings, and to get good weed control, we really need to flatten that down. So a few extra dollars on that final pass of cultipacking is quite helpful. But suffice to say that this land is really not very good. We have not been able to grow any viable crop there. We can't even rent it. We get a hay farmer to look after it, to keep it tidy. for $0 per year, and we're happy to have him. Earl Jackson, he makes his money shearing sheep, but he does also grow hay.
You didn't say where this is.
Pardon me?
You did not say where this is.
Oh, I'm sorry, Prince George, BC. So there's a few things I want to talk about. Obviously, I'm very open about my biases, but one of the things we did when we started out was we bought cuttings from everybody we could buy them from in North America. We bought cuttings from 9 or 10 different companies. We found 2 that were good at it, and we partnered up with them, and we still work together with them today. I think, as John pointed out, you got to figure out how to get people working together on these new things. And so cuttings, well hydrated, very, very important. Buds tight and hard when you plant. No loss of dormancy. 8 millimeter minimum diameter, and a lot of people would say 10, but it's hard for us to get that on some of the varieties, and particularly if they're grown anywhere outside a very productive agricultural area. They need to be straight, so they're easy to handle. We can't have a lot of curvature. Well nourished in the nursery. They have to be very low cost to the store. You know, we're talking down in the 10-cent range here. We need, you know, very, very simple production methods to make this work. And finally, freezer storage. Planting, we have a couple of different options. A small 2-row planter can do about 6 acres a day. We have a 6-row planter, which, by the way, you'll see some ridging here behind the planter. We have fixed that. We've got some hilling discs on that now. But in the clay soil, we didn't get as good a closure as we did on the creamy soil. And then one of our partners, AA Willow in New York, has an Eggadol energy planter, which is a rod planter. Plants like 6 to 8 foot tall willow rods, chops them as they're going into the ground, and puts them in at that similar spacing. Weed control. The keys to success: moisture, cuttings, and weed control. So I'm going to spend a little bit more time on weed control. What I'm trying to illustrate here is these are some leaf patches. So we had to demonstrate to some of the authorities how important pre-emergent herbicides were for us. And so these are little leaf strips where you're driving along in the tractor and you just turn the sprayer off for 5 seconds. I wished I'd turned it off for 1 second. But at any rate, we demonstrated it fairly well. This is lamb's quarter in the area without the pre-emerge. That amount of lamb's quarter in the area with the pre-emerge is also too much. So don't get thrown off by that, but it gives you a pretty good idea. Here you can actually see where the operator turned the boom on the sprayer. The willow out here, and this is the headland. So you can actually see where he turned on as he came into the road. We believe that if you want to reduce this, the way to go is to use a cover crop and do your tillage the year ahead. And so we're working on, these are actually peas grown the year before. They are on biosolids, so they've grown pretty well there. Come back to that point. But we've done the weed control the year ahead, burn off, tillage, cover crop, to try and dominate the weeds. And then after your initial pre-emerge, we don't have a lot of options in Canada in terms of labeled herbicides, so we have to play around a bit. This is a cultivator from Quebec, I believe at Berthierville. And this is a multi-head rotivator that Derek Sitters and Tim Keddy use. And we use a sweet cultivator. We're just copying Francis Allard at AROWRN in Quebec. Pre-emerge first, and then use the sweet cultivator after to throw a bit of soil up into the plant rows. Just trying to give you an idea of some of the options. We have a 6-row shielded sprayer, a 2-row shielded sprayer. This one's actually working really well. And we're also doing some work with flame weeding. That's borrowed from organic farming, where we actually lick flame right out into the plant row, and about 1/10 of a second on the willow doesn't bother the willow at all. The problem with it is the weeds have to be absolutely dry, and they have to be very, very small. If they're at all big, this doesn't bother, and this won't do anything to grass. Grass is hopelessly evolved for fire. So forget about it. The objective here, we feel we need to have 80 centimeters of height by the middle of August. If we don't, we don't think we're going to get there. And I just want to stop briefly to talk about why. This is an agricultural crop. This is not a forest. We need to achieve cover. In agriculture, you'll hear cover date. So a corn cover date might be 6 to 7 weeks after it's planted, where the corn has completely dominated the site. With willow in this form, that it takes 2 seasons to achieve that. So we're not talking about weeks; we're talking about 2 seasons. And so the weed control has to be done in a way that we can achieve that. So this is what we want to see by the middle of August. This is poplar on the right, willow on the left. And I can't overemphasize that. If the variety is not capable of that, then I think you're just asking for trouble. Coppice at the end of the first year, that means to cut it back to ground level. Coppice is a verb and a noun. A coppice is a word that describes a thicket of plants. And that's exactly what we're trying to create, something that is very difficult to walk through by the end of the second year. So we coppice at the end of the first year, we cut back. This slide I use because it illustrates the way the crop is planted. These are 30-inch rows with every third row left out. So that seems to be the way I'm able to get it across to farmers who grow row crops. The third row is left out to leave room for the harvester wheels and the wagon wheels. We have adopted the twin row system because that's what's dominant in the world, and we prefer to copy other people who've been successful. So that's what we're doing. This is Viminalis 5027. That's a variety that was developed by the Quebec Ministry of Natural Resources. So August of the first year after coppice, so now we're into the second growing season. We want that willow to be at least head height by that point. So now we're starting to achieve that dominance of the site.
What have you got growing underneath there?
Pardon me?
What have you got growing underneath there?
Buttercups?
Buttercups.
These? That's just whatever was around the edge of the site. And this fellow, I want to mention, Olivier Bonnefoy, he's our manager at Red Rock in Prince George. Wonderful guy. His background is rubber plantations. He's educated in France, rubber plantations in Africa, and he's really got a good feel for that judgment call of, okay, the willow's dominating the site now, we can stop paying attention. Not stop paying attention, but stop worrying about the weeds. Let the willow take over. And Peter Richter and Bruce and Mark Montville down in Oregon. This is actually, that is first year after coppice in Oregon. So, and that's in Prince George. Now, I just want to talk about the biosolids. I don't agree that willow will die from lack of water. Willow seems very tolerant. It'll senesce the lower leaves, and it won't grow anywhere near as much as it can with water. But the real difference we see with the biosolids, where we've done biosolids and no biosolids, but we've made sure the nutrition and the soil chemistry was okay on the non-biosolids area, the growth is still much, much more with biosolids. Like very, very considerably more. So that would suggest that it has to do with the soil properties and I think moisture retention. That 25 dry matter tons per hectare of biosolids is increasing our moisture retention on the site drastically compared to this very low quality sand. So that's end of the first year after coppice. And it's hard to get these pictures, but I asked this tour group, could you all stand in it while I jump on top of the van and take a picture? Because it's quite difficult to give you the sense of this. But that's actually, on biosolids, very hard to walk through that crop. The the same planting without biosolids is actually in the background there. I should have got a better picture, I apologize, but it's easy to walk through. So, now that was City of Prince George biosolids. We were very fortunate in our first year. John Lavery and Mike Van Ham from Silvis popped in and talked to us. Hey, we hear you're growing willow. We've got a problem over here with biosolids. Let's talk about it. And since then, we've developed a bit of a relationship with Silvis, and it's been very, very helpful to what we're up to. So this is an effluent project. John Lavery from Silvis. This was not Coppice, so it was planted and then left to grow for 2 years, which is another option. When everything goes right and you achieve cover in the first year, you can consider not Coppice. You've got to make that decision carefully, but it's all about achieving cover. So if the variety is filling that site in entirely, we have one called Millbrook, which seems to do that in the first year and could be advantageous. So enough of that. Thanks for the pictures. What does it cost? I apologize, dollars per acre, times 2.5 in rough terms. And this is all about size. So, we've estimated large projects, anything into the thousands of acres, and everything changes. But to give you a rough idea, I wanted to get this out in the open. I don't need to talk all about the slide. I think is it reasonably legible? Yeah. Big difference is project management. So you've got to be on this crop in a big way from, I would say, everything's relatively easy up until about the second week of June or third week of June. After that, you've got to be all over it on the weeds. You've got to be watching for the grass competition, in particular outbreaks of any noxious weeds, and make sure that you're bringing that under control. Making the tough decisions if for any reason one of your varieties had dried out before you planted it or something, you've got to give up on that area right away and redo it.
But this has not, the cost of electricity, like Richards was talking about, like $10,000 to get three-phase power to the site, is not included in this.
No, all I'm talking about is the establishment of the crop. Yeah, absolutely. So on a real large scale, our round numbers are between 1,000 and 1,500 an acre, or between 2,500 and 5,000 per hectare. So the feedstock, what do you need to produce in order to have something of value? You've got to be reliable. Nobody's going to want to buy energy that isn't reliable. They're used to something coming out of a pipe and not thinking about it too much. It's got to be easy to use. It's got to be consistent in quality, and it's got to be competitively priced. And that aspect, that's what excites me as a willow grower, is that if we can combine these values in the way that was described to us last night, then I think we can make something work. But as it sits today, a power producer in the U.S., where I'd say they're much further ahead on biomass than we are here, the magic number is $56 a dry ton for biomass. That's what they need to do, and we can't do that without being able to have these other input values in the project.
It's delivered to the plant.
That's right, yeah. You can't even do that on dead mountain pine beetle that's already at the roadside in British Columbia. So, that's where we're at in terms of the, whatever you want to call it, macroeconomics.
I don't quite agree with that. The logging cost in Alberta, for example, that is the harvesting and the trucking to the mills is $30 total.
Right.
So why would this be more expensive?
I'm sorry, I'm not in a position to get into that. The only part I know is the guys in BC who have roadside piles of dead wood have told me they can't make 56 a ton. And now when they had equipment, when they were all going broke, and they had equipment that they were willing to wear out, that was possible, and they didn't have other work. But then as they needed to replace that equipment, as that equipment wore out, and they wanted to make their full capital recovery, this is what the guys in the bush have told me. But we need it all. I am not here to say that this is a magic bullet, silver bullet that can solve everybody's problems. I think everyone involved in renewable energy and sustainable development knows that we need a whole suite of things. We're already reliant on a whole suite of things that are not sustainable. If we want to move in a different direction, we need a whole suite of things that are sustainable, and a whole lot of people working together. Harvesting, just very briefly, harvesting was a constraint on the system not, well, 3-4 years ago. I think it appears that there is sufficient range of equipment available that can get this job done today. And that's just a matter of making it all work together in terms of number of projects and the size of the equipment.